that an emotional, brutal, painful series of events was finally coming to the end. Jesus had endured horrible torture and humiliation and insult after insult, and now he is finally nailed to a cross. A huge stake is driven through each of his wrists, and another is driven through his legs. Now, this is an execution that was reserved for only the worst of the worst criminals. And we're told that Jesus hung right in the middle of two actual criminals. And they were outside the gate of the city, where just a week earlier, he had ridden into town on a donkey and been exalted and praised as the coming king. Now up on this hill for everyone to see, he was there bloody and beaten and slowly suffocating to death. Probably the best word to describe it is the word excruciating. Now, did you know the word excruciating was invented by the Romans? And it's because they didn't have a word in their language that adequately could describe how painful being hung on a cross was. So they used this new word, excruciating, from the cross. And so as he hung there in this excruciating pain, to be a deterrent to others, to try to show people how powerful Rome could be, he hung there for about 3 hours. And then suddenly the sky went black and everything became dark. And then Jesus has only one more thing to say. He says, "It is finished." In Greek, the word is tetelestai. One word. It is finished. Tetelestai means to accomplish. It means to complete. It means to bring something to its final end. This is the word you would use if you climbed Mount Everest and you got to the very top and you were going to plant your flag. You would say tetelestai. Or if you were running a marathon and you finally crossed the finish line, when you finally make that last payment on your house, maybe when you sent your taxes in on Monday, tetelestai, it's finished. Jesus, of course, was a carpenter. When he would get done making a table for someone or some chairs for someone, he might say after completing it, tetelestai. But there's even something more powerful about this word that Jesus uses, because he uses it in the perfect tense, which I had to look up to remind myself what that means. What it means is it's something that was completed in the past, but still is in effect today. You see, if something is just in the past tense, it's something happened back there. But when it's the past perfect tense, it's something happened in the past that still matters, that still has an impact, even yet today, 2,000 years later. And it will continue to impact things into the future. Now, when we read these words of Jesus, "It is finished," we can't help but wonder, well, what exactly is he talking about? What exactly is finished? Well, the Bible has all sorts of answers to that question, all sorts of things that were finished in that moment as Jesus gave up his life. Well, the evil intentions and plots of his enemies were finished. His own suffering was finished. Many, many Old Testament prophecies were now completed and finished. The ceremonial law of the Old Testament is finished. The power of sin and the power of Satan are finished. And the work of his redemption is now finished. But there's another definition of the word tetelestai that I think is so important for us to understand. Because this word was also commonly used as people would go shopping, as they would visit merchants in town. Because you see, another definition for tetelestai in the 1st and 2nd century was paid in full. When you would go and pay your bill and you would receive a receipt, on that receipt, stamped right across the front, would be the word tetelestai, paid in full. When I graduated from college, I came home and my parents wanted to celebrate. And so they said, pick any restaurant you want to go to, and we'll go celebrate. Well, growing up in the North Metro, in the Shoreview area, my favorite restaurant was Lindy's in Arden Hills, famous old steakhouse. It's kind of a place that is stuck in the 1950s. Not much has changed other than the price. And at that time, there were only 4 things on the menu. And all 4 things on the menu were steak. And they were all great. So I said, all right, I want to go to Lindy's for dinner. And we went and we had a fabulous meal together. And all the while, I knew that this was going to be a pretty large bill. You know, and my dad's a pastor, and so I'm thinking this is going to be kind of a stretch for them. Well, finally, the waitress came out with the little packet and brought it out to our table. And my dad opened it up to see what the damage was. And there was a postcard, which was kind of curious. And so he flipped the postcard over. And he said, and it read, "Dinner is paid for. Love, Grandpa and Grandma." And they lived in Tucson, Arizona. And they had somehow called up and they had taken care of everything. Now, we were so surprised, so we were asking the waitress, well, you know, at least can we tip you? Or is there some, you know, is every charge? She's like, nope, it's all been taken care of. It's been paid in full. You don't owe another cent. You see, that's what tetelestai means. Your sins have been paid in full. Now, this is amazing news. This is huge because the Bible is clear that every single person who has ever lived, every single one of us, is a sinner. It's simply our nature. It's who we are. And the Bible is also clear that the wages of sin is death. Every one of us deserves a death sentence. Every one of us has accumulated a huge debt before God, and we owe him our life. But with that huge debt that we owe, Jesus came and he found a way to pay for it all. He took our place. He paid our penalty. And our debt is finished. And he accomplished this through the shedding of his blood and the giving of his perfect life for you and for me. There was a book that was written a number of years ago called Written in Blood. And the author, Robert Coleman, tells a story of a little boy whose sister needed a blood transfusion. The doctor had explained that she had the same disease as the brother of hers that had recovered 2 years earlier. And her only chance for recovery was a transfusion from someone else who had conquered the same disease. So since these 2 children had this very rare genetic condition and also had the same rare blood type, her brother was the ideal donor. So the doctor asked the little boy, would you give Mary your blood? Johnny hesitated. His lower lip began to quiver. And then he smiled and he said, well, sure, she's my sister. Soon the 2 children were wheeled into the same hospital room. Mary was pale and thin. Johnny was robust and healthy. Neither spoke when they met. And then Johnny grinned. And the nurse inserted the needles into their arms. And it's then that Johnny's smile started to fade a bit. And he watched intently as the blood exited his arm into the tube. When the ordeal was almost over, his voice, slightly shaky, broke the silence. He said, "Doctor, when do I die?" Only then did the doctor realize why Johnny had hesitated and why his lip had trembled when he had agreed to donate his blood. He thought giving his blood to his sister meant giving up his life. And in that moment, he had decided to make that sacrifice. Johnny, fortunately, didn't have to die to save his sister. But you see, each one of us has a condition much more serious than Mary's. And it required Jesus to not only give his blood, but to give his entire life for you and for me. Ephesians 1:7 says, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of God's grace." Jesus paid the cost in full by shedding his blood so that you could be made free. So as you think about your life today, as you think about your relationship with God today, what sin, or maybe sins, are separating you from God? What's holding you back today? What's weighing you down as you sit in this place? For some, it might be anger. Others, lust. Maybe unbelief. Maybe addiction. Maybe cheating. Maybe greed. Maybe stealing. Maybe adultery. Maybe pride. The list goes on and on. But here is the best news that you can hear. No matter what your struggle is, no matter what your story is, no matter what you have done or said in the past, present, or even into the future, no matter how many sins you have piled up in your life, no matter how guilty you might be, no matter how many sins you maybe have committed this week or this day or even this hour, all of your sins have been stamped with one word: tetelestai, because of what Jesus did on the cross. Paid in full. Whatever sins you might be struggling with today, let Jesus come and write over the top of them with that word. Because through his blood, he already paid the price. All of your debt has been paid. Jesus' sacrifice was sufficient to pay the debt for every single person who has ever lived or ever will live. What Jesus' death accomplished is so awesome, so total, and so complete. There is nothing else that is needed at all. There's nothing more we can do. There's nothing more that we have to do. If Jesus truly paid it all, it means you don't have to pay anything else. Not even one more cent. Because think of it this way. God's not trying to split the bill with you. He's not offering it to you at a discount. It's not just a coupon. It's a free gift of his grace. And since Jesus paid the full cost, every cent of it, the only thing you can do is choose to accept the gift or reject it. Really, your choice is let him pick up the tab or stay in debt. And so on this day, where we remember a painful, bloody, agonizing event, we need to remember this incredible promise. Jesus left absolutely no unfinished business behind. He finished what he came to do. And in doing so, on your life's receipt is stamped one word, written in the red of his blood, paid in full, tetelestai. In Colossians, it says, he canceled the record of the charges against us and took it away by nailing it to the cross. He canceled the record of the charges against us. He paid every cent of the cost. He sacrificed his life so that we could be made free. Have you claimed that incredible gift? Have you accepted Jesus into your heart? Have you allowed his forgiveness and his grace and his mercy to be showered upon you? Don't go another minute without accepting his gift of grace. Welcome him into your heart. Accept his payment and live your life in thanksgiving for what he's done.